selecting substitutes within the confines of the NEPF, our bargaining agreements, and employment law. This bill was never intended to give principals unconditional authority to select staff. Second, we must raise the concern over AB 469 and people-centered funding plan. It is our belief that thoughtful consideration must be given on how unused funds distributed in accordance with the PCFP's weights and reallocated as carried over dollars. It is our belief that the reallocation of those unused funds in the subsequent school years violates the intent of the PCFP, that school precincts must utilize the PCFP weighted funding to its fullest extent pursuant to the SB 543/2019 in the current year. The Clark County Education Association and over 18,000 licensed educators professionally thank you and your hard work, and we look forward to further participation in regulatory process to define the parameters around our concerns in AB 469. Respectfully, Hawwa Ahmad. The next one is from a Kay Barlow. I am commenting to express my concern for CCSD's seeming unwillingness to comply with the requirements of AB 469. The Clark County School District Board voted on Thursday to take back control of all service level agreements. Even if this is a necessary, which it is not, this is not something that the school board can control. AB 469 and the resulting NRS 388G is state law, and as such requires legislation to be altered. The reorg law requires, among other things, that individual precincts be given control over service level agreements. This has never been the case since the passage of the law. CCSD has not even made an attempt to relinquish control of service level agreements. Please require CCSD to at least try to comply with the intent of all aspects of the law before giving up. Thank you, Kay Barlow. And last one is from a Rebecca Garcia. My name is Rebecca Garcia. I am the SOT parent representative and chair of two school organizational teams in Clark County. I'm also the president of the Nevada PTA. I am not able to be in attendance because I am chairing an SOT meeting at this time. Agenda item number 5 includes reference to an SOT survey, but noon today, no backup was posted for further clarification. I'm wondering who completed this survey and how it was disseminated. I do not receive information regarding the survey, or did I complete it with either of my SOTs. Now that the backup has finally been posted, the number of responses also seems to indicate many SOTs did not provide feedback. I am concerned because this seems to be an ongoing issue with SOT matters. The information does not get universally shared, and therefore, as a response, are not always fully representative of a broader community feedback. The same issue was reported with the SLA survey sent out by the CCSD, which both my SOTs completed, but I heard from several SOT members across the district that did not have the same opportunity. Until a proper communication option is set up to ensure all SOT members are reached without a middleman, I worry about the feedback received will continue to be lacking a full picture of SOT members' responses. Thank you, Rebecca Garcia. And that concludes written public comment.
They telling the truth.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dylan.
The people that are testifying at the legislative.
So as we begin, I'd like to remind everybody that the purpose of the subcommittee is to create recommendations on items surrounding implementation.
Okay. So the purpose of the subcommittee, that's what they wanted to talk about. To provide recommendations as to how to support the local schools in doing the work, because they're not doing the work. So many people just don't understand the power that they have in local control, as we are all American citizens. And what does that actually mean? It means that, I just really want to know what they're doing. And if I can look at the school plan and I can look at how they are implementing services and see the data, then I can understand what's happening. But when the outcomes just mystify you, as it's difficult to understand why so many children are failing. Well, because they do task completion here, which I'm confused about. Task completion. What does that mean? Mean that they are only really talking about how many assignments got done, and anybody could do the assignments, because I realized that when Tyler was in science and engineering, that some of the work couldn't have been done by those students. It was done by their parents, but the students got the grades. Tyler did his own work. So therefore, when he got the assessments and whatever, he really did benefit. and he passed the high school exit exam, the Casey, in which they stopped even assessing children to have the high school exit exam. All his demonstration of passing the high school exit exam in the 8th grade demonstrated that the work could be done. But the only way the work gets done is if the people on the ground are measuring the benefit of the offer of FAPE. And what am I talking about, the offer of FAPE? Because here I was so confused as to why, just why was there so many children who were not enrolled in early start or early kindergarten? Then I realized that this is a city of entertainment. They have to have employees. So they were bringing in foreign workers, because they have to have employees. And the Black people weren't willing to be the maids anymore. They wanted more. But when they don't give you more, you can't get more. And that's just real. So, anyways, now we're harvesting and these people are coming here to work, but we have to give them childcare. So, we raised the income thing up to 200% of the poverty level so that people who wanted to work could have childcare. And those who were not working, or not enrolled in school, did not get into the program. We create this great divide about who actually benefits and who does not benefit. And so many people have not benefited to the point to feel as if they are not worthy of public education. And I don't understand this, Harbor. As I saw the application, and the bottom half of the application is just criminal. It's straight up crime. It's straight up just jacking people, telling them if they sign this piece of paper, they're releasing all their rights to their children and all the responsibility to the damage of the children while they're in the program. And I'm saying, I never seen no shit like this, because it required you have an application for free and reduced lunch. You understand what that means? It means the money was going to be allocated. It was all about the money. And that money wasn't even going to support your children once you pull them out of public school. And you're pulling them out. And the obligation was not going to be on the state or the county or the city or just nobody. And I just said, I didn't even know how that happened. I'm confused. Totally confused. I mean, I think I recorded that application just because I was so confused. But it really doesn't matter, because if people don't know they have rights, they just don't have any. They're not experimenting. America, it really is an experiment. People have to understand the assumption of freedom and what it means. The presumption of guilt and what that means. And really, what it really means is that because we understand that certain children aren't getting an education, so they're most likely to be out there thieving and whatever. And, why should we waste that money on them? Because they don't even appreciate it. So the people who are being involved and engaged are ensuring what? Access for their people. I heard something come out of Nancy's mouth the other day. She said that there are criminals online that are stealing and reselling items, and we need to stop that. We need to control that and whatever. So we need to force and do things to people to ensure, that we know where they're getting their items from. But, as things have serial numbers, you should be able to track that. And if you implement something with serial numbers where you can track stolen items, you'll cut down on that stuff, because it makes it too much work to change the serial numbers. You get me? Boo. Huh. The real deal is that you don't own anything anyway. When you buy something, you put it on the internet and they track it. They control it. Hell, they really control it. They tell it what to do. You don't tell it what to do. And it's just real. I think I annoy people because I know how this stuff works. I really don't care about the annoyance, as I'm a citizen. And I'm really just putting this out there for the public. And I noticed all of my videos were being what? Said that was just for my friends. Well, I have lots of friends And if you're on my page, then you're my friend. That's all I can say. So the public is not many more. And because I don't really discriminate, I don't care about this social media stuff. It's just a way to communicate. And you have to understand that, we were always beaten because wherever one or more of us gathered, it was a concern to many people. And so they made it so that we couldn't gather as a people. And it was strategically planned across this nation that wherever we were gathering, they needed to be. I mean, just as there is no Moulin Rouge here, there is no Cotton Club. Oh, the Raiders coming from Oakland, representing something totally different. Did y'all see that basketball game? The Lakers and the one little Caucasian boy or white boy or however you want to see him in the sea of chocolate boys because he made that shot. They put him in because somebody else had COVID and he made the shot. And it's real how they use our people for entertainment because in many ways we are gifted. But when they create that rage in people and they make that rage okay, Henry Ruggs, rage, excellent football player, attitude adjustment. Who was monitoring that? Nobody. And that's why they don't have, this unity that they need to have because they just totally destroyed it by not standing by their player. It was an accident and the news media made it a murder, but it was an accident, but it was carelessness. And it was a lot of reasons behind that carelessness. If they had never brought him here, he would still be a free man, perhaps, maybe not. Maybe his behavior would have already locked him up in the jailhouse. Perhaps so. But you can't encourage this rage in people and then accept no personal responsibility for the encouragement of the rage, because that could have been controlled, especially during the season. I mean, there just has to be some rules established, but for many people who live by no rules, you get me? They don't have rules. It's just real. The rules that they don't have. Simply why? Because they create the rules for themselves. Let's just listen to a little bit more of this untaped meeting that they had.
Of Assembly Bill 469. Any recommendations voted on or recommended during the subcommittee meetings must go to the full board for final approval or action. So the subcommittee will now receive an update on action proposed at the December 9th, 2021 meeting of the Clark County School District's Board of Trustees meeting regarding service level agreements, as well as an update on the status of CCSD's collective bargaining agreements. Ms. Ballard and Mr. Gowdy, please proceed when you are ready.
So I want to say something about that 85-15. When you take federal dollars, 15% can be reserved at the district level to provide the administrative services, just 15%. And then 85% goes to the school. But the schools that are generating that money are not charter schools. And they are not rural schools. They are Title I schools, 100% Title I schools, or neglected and delinquent placements. That's where the federal dollars go. But then the state has an obligation to put their dollars in the pot too. And you see that this last time, because there was a concern of them moving the money, that 200 million short that they were always short of, it was going to be really prevalent that they wanted to move that 200 million. And see that Jason Gotti, he likes to talk about the waivers for the Zoom and Victory schools. Why would there be waivers under Zoom and Victory schools? And those are only schools that were measuring the benefit of the offer of FAPE to the people who were enrolled in the program. I mean, that AB 469, and people needing to go back and read that item 13, which concerned me. And actually other things concern me too, when the governing board struck its responsibility to govern the superintendent. But that wasn't really the governing board doing that. That was the staff and CCSD, because they took it all the way back to 2016. That wasn't a boo-boo. That wasn't a mistake. That was an intentional statement that they was gonna always do it the CCSD way. Y'all heard it. They said there's a right way and then there's a wrong way. But then there's the CCSD way. That's what they said. And I said, well, wow, CCSD way. Okay. What can I say? Because I noticed that the CCSD way was not about creating equitable or equity, and that they just did never follow any of the IDA 2004. They didn't just do goals 2000. I mean, I don't believe they ever entered into anything that the federal government had moved forward since 1964. I mean, it was bad enough that they had to do the magnet programs, but then they saw magnet as a promising prospect because they manipulated the boundaries for magnet programs and brought their children in and left our children out. So the people who actually lived there who have behavioral issues could just be suspended or expelled for life at the age of 11. And I'm saying, wow, how punitive, how restrictive. And how could they write that in state policy? Because, states make policies and the federal government, well, they just seem to make the laws. And that's why I'm not restricted on Facebook anymore. And the little games that they play by changing the settings on my video when I save it for the public to make it for my friends. And then they stop sharing or telling me that I'm not connected to the internet and I'm connected in my home. I come this way because I know that they can't participate in the meddling of what I would like to say. They can't alter it. So I paid for this little program, but they have a free program too. But it doesn't give you the ability to go live on Facebook or live on YouTube. But it's just the more they push you, the more you have to learn. And the more you learn, the more you understand what they're doing to you, and the more you can speak on it. But life is about trials and tribulations. As you're going through the journey, what do you actually know? Have you actually been successful? Far too many people that participate in the public policy arena have children that are incarcerated. My children have not been incarcerated, and I hope they never will. Hope they pay attention to what's paying attention to them, as I pay attention every day to who's paying attention to me. But nothing changes the fact that you are just who you are. You are just who you choose to be. Let's listen to a little bit more of the commitment, shall we? Let's hear what he has to say, Mr. Gowdy, criminal.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Superintendent Ebert, members of the subcommittee. My name is Kelly Ballard. I serve as the Chief Strategy Officer for the Clark County School District. I'm here with Jason Gowdy, Chief Financial Officer. As you know, I've been asked to share with you today an overview of agenda item 5.01 from the CCSD Board of Trustees meeting on December 9th, as well as an update on the district's collective bargaining agreements, presumably as it relates to NRS 388G. As you're aware, under item 5.01 from the agenda of the December 9th board meeting, the CCSD Board of Trustees approved the superintendent's recommendation for a series of transfers of responsibility under NRS 388G.
So that NRS 388G, I mean, I think I let the computer read it. You need to take the time to listen, but it transfers the authority from the governing board to another whatever agency. But anyways, this guy over here was saying that he was able to reroute $200-something thousand or $155,000 that they had not spent because of those alternative programs. And I'm saying, with the number of children who are not making it in Clark County, being fifth to the bottom, I don't know how he feels that, they can redistribute that money, because legally, when you don't spend the money at the local school site that generated the money, well, that money just goes back to the federal government to be redistributed. Did you not hear that on one of my little readings of the law and the process? And so therefore, that's why they had to go to the AG's office, because they need to understand about that 200 million that they're short, that they've been short every year. And because, When Tyrone Thompson was living, he really fought for read by grade 3. And all of the children, oh, there's a county of Nevada. I wonder what they're doing out here. I gotta go peek at the window. County truck come rolling through here. It's always interesting. How far down do they go? Wait. Oh, they're barking. What are they doing? See what they're doing. I'll be back over there in 1 second because I'm going to come back. Yeah, this is interesting. Slowly they go. Yeah, we know. You turn. Well, sorry, got pulled away for a second, but it's always interesting. I could have pushed play and I didn't. But anyways, people really don't understand public education. That's what I can say. And I can honestly say that I came here and try to understand what they were doing. And it was confusing to me. Why? Because they have SOT teams that operate like PTAs. And they were really talking about the student achievement. But then I've heard 2 or 3 people say that they sat on an SOT team and but certain things they don't get to do. And they're asked to fill out surveys as if surveys represent data. Surveys do not represent data. Surveys just represent how the people feel. And, a lot of people feel like, they put those surveys out there. And even Sac City started doing surveys because it was something that was allowable. And even if it was allowable, they're still required the data. You know what I'm saying? So if you're moving kids, you have to have manifestation hearing data, and you have to determine what and why that child could no longer be in its current placement. But when you don't have any of the manifestation data and you're not doing the manifestation hearings and you're just moving children, and you created environments in which separate and unequal services happen, like they had a brand new school. They put $5 million into it for 60 girls that have been sex trafficked. And I'm saying, who wants to be identified as being sex trafficked? Who wants to graduate from a program that was sex trafficked? I just want to understand the whole intent behind public education as, it should be inclusion and just not the illusion of inclusion. And I think that that's where most people live, the illusion of being included, because you see it on the television every day. Every day you see Black people. And then when they decide to make somebody a criminal, like they made R. Kelly a criminal, and they made, you know, this last guy a criminal because he said that somebody called him some names or whatever. But, sticks and stones break your bones. But names, I don't know how they hurt you, because I'm sure people have had names for me over the past. And guess what? I don't care. Have your names. It doesn't change my ability to understand what I have the ability to do, or what I have the ability to conceive or perceive, because first you have to perceive it. But then you need to go read that item 13, like I went and read it. You need to read this item AB 469. There's a lot of bills that you need to read because they say we're going to do this work right up until we run out of money. And then these people want to act like they're running out of money. No, money's just not being spent, and it's set as a reserve, meaning that the intention was to move this money. And that violates the law because that's called supplanting. And if you didn't know what supplanting was, now you know. Let's listen to a little bit more of the supplanting objective. Oh, wait. I gotta stop here. Someone is walking in our backyard. That was truly weird. So that was somebody from the Nevada something, got that emblem on the side, but they walked right down past our house and then walked back.
These transfers were related to a 2018 decision of the board to approve transfers of responsibility for specified central
Transfers.
services utilizing service level agreements with restrictions that required schools to purchase services from central office under the agreements and required any future changes that risk job loss to be approved by the board. As you know, and it has been discussed in this committee, the service level agreements in question were not in compliance with the NAC. In order to correct the non-compliance with the NAC, the district must have either brought the existing service level agreements into compliance, which would allow principals to opt out of those services, or remove those service level agreements, because the district's position is that it's not in the best interest of students to allow principals to opt out of most of these services. Specifically, the right path was to remove the service level agreements. The recommendation was intended to serve two purposes. First, to bring the district into compliance with the NAC as it relates to service level agreements. And second, to complete full transfers of responsibility for items that the superintendent recommended be carried out by schools under the full authority of the principal. In the future, the district will only implement service level agreements in cases where the agreements can be implemented in support of providing equitable and adequate services to all students in the schools, in partnership with principals with the advice and assistance of their SOTs, and in full compliance of NAC 388G. During the meeting, we heard public comment from 10 members of the public, I think I counted, and fielded many questions from our trustees seeking to understand the goal and impact of the recommendation. Trustees sought to be certain that this action would be restricted only to those items listed in the reference material, which we affirmed, and to understand why some of the recommendations would benefit some schools and not others, how schools might be able to carry out the responsibility being transferred to them, and how the full action would impact the district's compliance with the NRS and the NAC. And finally, one trustee recommended that the CCSD board members participate with the members of this subcommittee as this collaborative work continues. So because the Board of Trustees approved the recommendation, there will be no service level agreements. There are no service level agreements planned to be in place next year so far. So in their 2022-2023 school budgets that they receive next month, principals will receive carry forward from this year's service level agreements, but will not see a budgeted amount for any 22-20.
Because that money can't go there. Because they're service level agreements. They're not local control. They're not what the schools are actually doing. Then that's not the work. And because they don't have the data for all children, well, that's why they're conflicted. That's why they needed to meet with the AG. So we just all need to wait to see whatever we can see, the future's not ours, you see, que sera, sera, que sera, sera. Because if this district has to enter into, what do they call, receivership, things can get better. Now let's listen to a little bit more.
3 service level agreements. Like I said to our board, this recommendation was not intended to complete the district's work toward compliance with NRS 388G by any means. The district is committed to continuing our work with the Board of Trustees, the Nevada Department of Ed, and the State Board of Education, inclusive of this subcommittee, to continue this progress.
Yeah, let's hear this.
One of those additional areas that require progress is related to the requirement that principals have the authority to select the teachers, administrators, and other staff who work under the direct supervision of the principal. This is an area that the district has been able to successfully negotiate with only one of our employee groups, that group representing administrators. We do have a thorough proposal from ESEA, the group representing our support professionals, and a meeting with them set for tomorrow. And we also have received a proposal from CCEA representing our teachers, with a meeting set for the beginning of January, middle of January. At this point, I'd be happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Ballard, for your presentation. I will open it up to thoughts and questions from the subcommittee members.
Please do.
Member Newbern.
Member Newbern, thank you for being here. I'm a CCSD graduate. kids that went to CCSD, I have grandkids that went to CCSD, and my father used to be president of the board of trustees. So my family has 50 years of experience with CCSD.
Years of access.
So if I seem grumpy, it's because I've had 50 years experience with CCSD. So it was asked at the meeting why you didn't consult with the Department of Education. Because it seemed like an opportunity. If the district's attempting to come closer into compliance, it seems like a good chance to have that discussion, go over what might be a good first step. So again, why? I mean, it seemed like a no-brainer, like an easy win, because it certainly would have helped the argument at the meeting. So why again, in this newfound era of cooperation, did the district not talk to the department?
Kelly Ballard for the record,
Yeah, why didn't the district not talk to the Department of Education? Well, I think that everybody here in Nevada has been doing it their way, because the Department of Education put $8 million into the Donor's Choice program. Now, Donor's Choice is just about like what the PTA does in the state of California, but they're doing it with federal dollars. And I'm saying that's violation of the federal rules, because that's federal money. So let's just understand everybody is on the same page here, except for me. Okay, and I'll just be calm about it. Let me just push play.
my answer is the same as it was to our board. I don't know. I can't answer why. Our actions were in direct result of the joint meeting here in this room in September, October, whatever it was. It didn't feel, I honestly didn't believe that this was going to be what turned out to be the most controversial or spoken of portion of this recommendation. I didn't think was going to be what it was. I anticipated another area to be something that would get the most attention. So if you're asking if I look back and would change the way I do things, yeah, almost always, right? Hindsight is real convenient, but at the time, I didn't feel like it was a necessary thing to do.
Okay, thank you. Because we're a board looking at developing new regulations. So it seems like an opportunity for us to develop some new regulations. I guess the other concern I have is the statement that the district is only going to do new SLAs that they basically like. I mean, the law is pretty clear. You're supposed to send 85% of the money to the schools. So we're struggling with a little bit. We're trying to work with the district, but at times it feels like the district is giving us and the legislature the finger. So can you go into more detail on that? I mean, what is the plan for the district to come into compliance?
Yeah, what was the plan?
Absolutely. Kelly Ballard for the record again. I want to draw a distinction between service level agreements and a transfer of responsibility. The superintendent, the current and past superintendent, has recommended a number of things.
So I just didn't understand the transfer of responsibility for the NRS 388G, because that's the alternative ed. And that's the money that's going through the county, and that's the harbor programs and all that other stuff. And so that's the transfer of responsibility that we're going to get into, but we don't get into here. So we'll see.
Be transferred to schools that had nothing to do with a service level agreement. These are things that principals receive the allocation for, the principals carry out however they want to carry it out. And they're not required to purchase services from us. They don't purchase services from us because there is no service level agreement. Otherwise, there would be one in place. So that statement, we would only implement service level agreements, is not when we want to. It is when we are able to provide that service for schools to purchase, that schools can choose whether or not to purchase from us.
Like they have
negotiate the service level agreement as contemplated in the NAC.
It's amazing.
And that's it. The recommendation for a transfer of responsibility would be something that the superintendent would need to choose under the law to recommend to the board with the input of all the stakeholders that are required. And that he would need to choose that in light of being in the best interests of pupils. Those are the reasons why
They really
we have
thought
had
that they
such a
had the right do
challenge
this,
to
and
get to
they
the
can't.
85%
They're gonna
since day
explain this
one.
stuff.
Many of the things that are currently still for this year in SLAs are things that we divided out from the central office budget just because they touch students or schools directly. I've presented that to you all before. Not because we thought those would be.
Because they touch students directly. So you have to understand the things that they're separating out directly connect to the money. Like I said, on that application for the harbor, you have to rescind your responsibility as a parent to ensure that child gets an education. And if that child gets injured, well, that's you're saying you don't want any compensation. And I'm saying I didn't understand that one at all, because that meant that they didn't have to educate that child because you released the district from its obligation. And I'm just trying to understand that's not a scholarship. But anyways, that's the only way they can track the money from the children who are actually touched by the money. So let's just understand what we're saying here. What's that? Okay.
Appropriate for principals to be able to choose whether or not to fulfill. That if it was that easy, we would have done it 5 years ago, without a doubt. We have grown in the percentage in our strategic budgets exclusive of service level agreements from 55% at the very beginning, our first calculation. And I believe in my October 1 report, the most recent number was 78% of unrestricted funds are in strategic budget. So it's not like there's been zero progress made. The service level agreements were an attempt to bump us to the next level that did not work at all. Although there are benefits from it, we now know what things cost. We now have a mechanism for determining a per school cost in most places. We've gone through that exercise a few times to where when we do transfer out responsibilities now, it makes it a little bit easier for us to allocate the right amount of money to schools and get as close to an actual figure for what the district would have spent for each individual school, for example. So there have been some learning benefits from this SLA process. But we saw this action last Thursday as a means for us to reset, start fresh, continue. We did not feel, it was not intended to be a flipping the bird to the state board or to the legislature or anything like that. It was simply a next step in the continued progress to become in compliance. We know that the question whether or not the 85% is needs to be read in sync with the per pupil funding law, or if that usurps it. I'm sure that question will out, and we're prepared to go both paths. We have work to do either way. We want to be able to make decisions to transfer monies and responsibilities to schools based on real things that principals want or should have the authority to provide for their students, that we can facilitate or even make happen instead of trying to get to this arbitrary 85% figure, which has been such a challenge in the past.
So what is the plan? I mean, if the pupil-centered funding formula doesn't bail you out, because that's kind of what it looks like you're positioning for, is you're becoming compliant to NAC, and then you're hoping that there'll be a change, effectively a change in the law to bail you out at 85%. If that doesn't happen, what's the path that gets us to 85%?
Jason Gotti for the record. So the 85% is a challenge mathematically. If you look at the services that are listed in A through U and NRS 388G that the district is responsible, those can be transferred. Most of those could not be transferred to a school and give them the autonomy that they need. As an example, transportation could technically be transferred, but they would have no way to operate the transportation services. So it becomes an operationally unfeasible task. There are, as Ms. Ballard mentioned, there's approximately, and I don't have the number in front of me, 78% of our unrestricted funds are currently in strategic budgets. And those are the budgets for which schools have, I wouldn't say complete autonomy, because they still have certain requirements they have to meet under either the law and or district regulations. but they manage those components. The pieces that are not in there are the components that we previously classified as SLAs. There are a number of those that cannot be transferred, and I'll give an example as the correction schools. So we have to provide those by law, and these schools would have the ability to opt in or opt out. So that, even though we utilize that as an SLA to get us to the 85%, those are dollars which especially under the NAC, cannot be counted towards that 85%. So what we're anticipating trying to do in order to continue to move forward is analyze all services that are outside the strategic budgets and identify those services which are not legally bound to be provided, such as the correctional schools and other things, which no matter how we go down the path of a service level agreement, they couldn't be in compliance because the school could never have autonomy. If we eliminate those out, that gives us, a certain dollar figure for which is somewhat legally restricted. The next step would be to look at the other items, which could be legally transferred, but may not be able to be operationally transferred, such as transportation. Schools do not have the ability nor the funding to go buy buses. The only way the district buys buses at about 35 million a year is we have to bond for them. Individual schools do not have the ability to bond. So there's some what I'll call operational challenges there in a true transfer of responsibilities or an SLA agreement to allow them to have autonomy and therefore be in compliance with the NAC.
No, that's not.
And then the last step is to look at areas for which the schools want autonomy and that we believe we can actually give autonomy because they're not legally or truly operational. And I'll give an example that's been brought up many times, landscaping. Landscaping was one of the first items that we had identified as staff back in 2018, I believe, to transfer to the schools that deemed that they wanted to have that autonomy. It did not pass through the board for a couple of different reasons. There's some concerns about compliance with collective bargaining agreements, as well as the loss of staff, and also I think at the time the fingerprinting and all the other requirements. So there's some reasonable requests or reasonable discussion items from the board at that point.
Well, let's see how
and so the objective would be to identify all those components and essentially do the math to see what is what's not legally required, because I'm not positive. Well, I'm positive that we cannot reach 85% without including utilities and transportation. Those are the two biggest items outside of the current school budgets in single line items that without those two, mathematically, we cannot get to 85%. And so that's where I'm saying math becomes a problem, because it's just not physically enough dollars, because you can't transfer utilities. And if we agree to.
He's right. You can't give everybody some of that federal money. You can only use the federal dollars for the children who are generating the money. You didn't know that. Perhaps he didn't know that. He's right down to sharing every penny with every child. And that's where they're stuck.
You can't transfer transportation. Those two pieces will prevent us from ever getting to 85% under the NAC, because we can't use the SLAs anymore.
No, you can't use them anymore. Never could.
Okay, so when you say you can't use the SLAs, that you mean you're just not going to use the SLAs, right? I mean, the SLAs are part of the Superintendent Canavero's agreement with the district. So, and did I miss that something else changed? I mean, it seems like you just decided that that's not the right tool, even though it was part of that agreement with the old superintendent.
Kelly Ballard for the record, Member Newbern, we're not deciding not to do SLAs in the future. If you'll remember, our agreement with Dr. Canavero took place before the NAC. It was a means to, like I said before, I think he called it meaningful progress toward compliance. I think were his words. Those services, would the NAC have been in place before we transferred those services? We would not have transferred those services for the same reason that we don't believe they should be, principals should be able to opt out of those services. That argument is not new. That argument has not changed. If we get to a point where we can figure out an appropriate authority that needs to be transferred to schools that we believe we can offer to them as a service provider,
You
then
can
we will
only
implement a
offer
service level
what the
agreement.
state offers.
We're not out of the service level agreement by decision in any case right now.
Yes, you are. Let's see.
Does anybody else want to ask some questions?
Anybody?
Okay. All right. So here's
Joan doesn't
sort of
have
our
any
position.
explanation.
Okay. The school board took some action,
Yes, and it was illegal.
and it looked like to us they were attempting to become more compliant with the NAC, but suddenly they felt less compliant with NRS. And so we're trying to determine whether it's a step back, a step forward, or a sidestep. Because in the end, our goal is not to beat up the district. Our goal is to bring the district into compliance, to work with the trustees, educate them on what the goals of the legislature were with the bill. So this goes back to the first question. Taking that action
Was illegal.
without talking to the department caused lots of concern, okay? I'll take a step back, okay? This is my 50 years of
50 years,
experience
you
with CCSD summed up in 3 lines, okay? There's the right way, there's the wrong way,
And then there's our.
and there's the CCSD way,
That's right.
okay?
CCSD.
And
way.
so this was the CCSD way, okay? Which for a long time just annoyed people, but now it just seems to make people angry, right? I mean, we're at a point where anger at CCSD is the only unifying issue in our community, okay? So we're trying to get past all that.
Let's see.
We're
how you
trying
do
to
it.
work with the
Department.
district
Yeah.
to figure out how to bring this forward. So
Yeah, I want to know.
we're looking for more collaboration. We're looking to not be surprised by this kind of stuff because it just causes my email to fill out with conspiracy theories. Okay, so I think what I'm trying to do is convey a
His
sense
email is filling
that,
up with these conspiracy theories.
the days of CCSD just operating unilaterally would be better to be over, and then working with the department so that when these come up, we're not surprised. Because, you know,
They're
it
surprised.
just makes everybody angry. It made people angry at the meeting.
Oh, wow.
So
I missed.
how do we get out of this where we're getting surprised to where we're all working together
Somebody's not working together.
to trying to actually get this bill implemented?
So Member Newbern, I'm going to actually take it back a step further. And I'd like to consult Deputy Attorney General Gardner on, I guess, the legal perspective and in accordance with the law in the removal, CCSD's removal of the SAs. Are they closer to compliance now or further away?
Further away.
So from a legal perspective, where are we at on that piece?
On the backside of the burner.
This is Deputy Attorney General David Gardner. Be honest, I'm a bit unsure. I would think that we're a little bit farther, and the only reason for that is I believe the SLA's got us closer to a full 85% being in the hands of the school precincts. While as CCSD has stated, it wasn't really in their hands for things like transportation and utilities, they couldn't actually get to their hands. So there's that debate of whether it's actually closer or farther. I would say this probably brought us farther because now there's not even an attempt to get that 85% into the hands of the local school precinct as required by statute.
That's required by statute. It's by law. LAW.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that perspective. Member Newbern, if you have, I'm going to go to Member Hughes unless you have any additional comments at this time. Okay, Member Hughes.
Member Hughes for the record, appreciate you all being here. So just to follow up on a question that Member Newbern had, I'm just trying to reconcile and figure out sort of the end game here. So I'm hearing you all say that 85% is a mathematical impossibility. And yet we also know what the requirements of the law have stated. So I'm just curious, like, how do you all reconcile that? Is it just like, we're going to do as good as we can, and it's fine if we never get to 85%, because that's impossible. We're going to try to do some legislative action to change that 85% number. Like, I'm just trying to figure out, like, do we just sit here and say, like, we just are not going to comply forever, and that's just what's going to happen? Like, how do you all reconcile what you're saying is the math doesn't add up? And if the law says something very specific, like what is the pathway or what's the end game if those two things don't match?
Kelly Ballard, for the record, really great question. And it's been where we've been at from the beginning on the 8515. Our first attempt will be to get as close as we can get. We need to make sure that our community in all of its facets are aware of what choices would have to be made in terms of loss of services from central, in terms of risk to equity. While we make those decisions, that could get us closer to the 85. Theoretically, we could say we're cutting transportation down to what's I'm not saying we're doing this. We're not doing this. But theoretically, we could say we're cutting transportation down to what's required by law, which is transportation for special education students, right?
That's right.
So that would be a sort of give and take question that we would not want to even attempt without speaking with our community, because we know that transportation and getting kids to school is an important part of making sure they're learning. They got to be there. But it's gonna come down to choices that are big, meaty choices like those in order for us to get down to the 85%. Beyond that, yes, I would like to broaden the understanding of how those choices make the 8515 relatively impossible. That could set us up for being a little bit easier to receive some legislative recommendations on that point too. Absolutely, that's a possibility. I don't want to go down that route first because anytime we mention AB 469 or anything to do with it, how do I say this? Regardless of our motives, the worst possible scenario is what gets assumed. And so I don't think that we'll get much traction there until we have a community that understands the choices that we're trying to make and the challenge that it faces for us. I think that's the job we have in front of us. Beginning last week, our goal was not to get further away from compliance. Our goal was actually, I said to Jason, if these are not allocated, we're not in compliance anyway. Let's get rid of it and start from scratch. Let's get out there what we can get out there, and then we'll move forward.
You can't even do that.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. Let's look at it.
Can't do it.
That is exactly how this happened. I know that there's some assumptions about motives that are hurtful that get shared. So I'll be working to change that in the future.
It's not hurtful for them.
Great, thank you. And just sort of related question. I know that it was brought up earlier in terms of some of the language around in the best interest of pupils and decisions that can be made or not. I'm curious if you all can shed some light on how those, I could sit in a room by myself and say, like, here's all the things on my list that I'm just going to sort of say tangentially related to kids. So what's the parameters and guideposts that you all are using to make that determination? And also curious, how are community members' voices being brought in? We think about equity. And so you would hope that, there was sort of a community effort to actually make that determination around the decisions that are happening, and is that in the best interest of people or not? So how is sort of those types of decisions, how are they being made, and what's being included, and whose voices are being heard?
Those are the things that we'll be planning out in the future.
Now, you see, that is the problem right there. They said that those issues might be hurtful, the assumptions, but what's really hurtful is how it is playing out in our community and how it has been playing out, because people just totally go out there and throw stuff at people, free stuff, and they feel that they're addressing the issue. When the real issue is that they're required to continue to get the free shit. You're not going to get any either. And so the real deal is that the word is always e pluribus unum. Out of many, there's one, but out of one, there will be none. So who will you be in 2021? And so I say like, subscribe, and follow my podcast on Anchor, and please share. We have to wake up sometime. I recorded this and I shared it on my page. It just meant one thing. It meant that they didn't like it and they made it private, and I made it public. And so here we are, still at war, still standing as an American citizen. The word is e pluribus unum. Out of many, there's one, and out of one, there'll be none. So educate yourself, and let's understand we are all waiting to see what the AG does, right? We're all waiting. I'm going to end this for now. Y'all have a great day.